You have spent your life trying to be honest, trying to be authentic. You speak your mind, you act with integrity, and you refuse to mold yourself into something false just to fit in. But what happens when people around you are not ready for that? What happens when your honesty makes them uncomfortable? When your strength exposes their weaknesses? When your presence reminds them of everything they've tried to avoid? There's a fundamental truth that people struggle to accept. Not everyone is built for truth. Many people construct their lives around illusions, illusions of who they are, what they want, and what they believe. They don't want to face reality because reality is difficult. It's filled with responsibility, with consequence, with the weight of their own choices. When you refuse to lie to them, when you refuse to play their game, they see you as a threat, not as a friend. You see, people don't hate authenticity, they fear it because when someone truly authentic walks into a room, they change the atmosphere. You don't even have to say much. Your existence alone challenges the comfortable narratives that people have built around themselves. Hi people, welcome back to my channel. It's another Saturday with Bolurex. If you are coming across my video for the very first time, please do well to like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit on the notification bell so when the next video drops, you will be among the first set of persons to see it. If you are disciplined, you make the lazy uncomfortable. If you are truthful, you make the dishonest uneasy. If you are strong, those who rely on excuses will resent you. And when you don't compromise, when you don't shrink yourself down to make them feel better, you become someone they cannot handle. And this is where people misunderstand rejection. They think when others pull away, they lose friends. When they are criticized, it means something is wrong with them, but often it means the exact opposite. You were too real, you were too raw, you refused to play the game, and for that, you were cast out. Now, that is not a painful experience. It ought to be misunderstood. It ought to be seen as too much when all you were trying to do was be honest, be direct, be real, but you must not let this make you bitter. You must not let their rejection convince you that you should be less than what you are, because here is the thing: you were never meant to fit in with those who thrive on illusion. You were never meant to stay in a space where honesty is seen as a problem. If you lost people because you were too real, that's not a loss, it's a revelation. The right people, the ones who value truth, who respect integrity, who don't fear self improvement, will find you. And when they do, you realize that being too real was never the problem. The problem was that you spent too long trying to belong somewhere you never should have been in the first place. Keep this in mind: you are never needed everywhere, every time. Authenticity is a real thing. It requires courage because the moment you choose to be real, you become a mirror for those around you. And most people don't like what they see in the reflection. When you stand firm in your values, when you speak honestly without sugarcoating the truth, you disrupt the balance that others have carefully constructed. Many people live in a way that avoids discomfort. They avoid hard conversation. They avoid self-reflection. They avoid responsibility. And when you walk in unwilling to play, unwilling to entertain the falsehood they've surrounded themselves with, they don't know how to handle that. You will notice this in the way people react to you. Some will dismiss you, some will mock you, and some will avoid you altogether. not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence forces them to confront their own contradictions. When you are disciplined, you expose the laziness in those who make excuses. When you are honest, you make those who thrive on deception uneasy. When you take responsibility for your actions, you highlight the irresponsibilities of those who blame everything but themselves. This is why authenticity is intimidating. It doesn't allow people to hide at all. There is a cost to being real. The cost is that you will make enemies without trying. You will be misunderstood. Many would rather push you away than question themselves, because questioning themselves means they have to change, and change is uncomfortable. It is much easier to reject you than to confront their own weaknesses. But you must not let this deter you. People don't dislike the truth, they fear it. Truth is not soft, it is not gentle, and it does not make allowances for the fragile ego. It demands accountability, it demands growth, and it demands change that most people are not ready for. They would rather live in a carefully constructed reality where their flaws are hidden, where their weaknesses are ignored, and where their failures are always someone else's fault. The moment truth enters the picture, all of that crumbles. It strips away the comforting illusions, leaving only what is real, what is raw, and what can no longer be denied. And that is terrifying. That is why people resist truth so aggressively. It is not because they don't recognize it, it's because deep down they do, and that recognition forces them to make a choice to either accept the truth and change, or reject it and stay the same. The second option is easier. It requires no effort, no introspection, and no discomfort. And so, rather than confronting the reality of their own shortcomings, they turn their discomfort outward. They resent the truth bearer instead of the truth itself. They will call you arrogant, judgmental, insensitive, anything to discredit you so they don't have to listen. It is not your honesty that offends them, it is the fact that your honesty exposes the lies they have told themselves. If they have built their life around self pity, your resilience is a threat. If they have built their identity around victimhood, your refusal to complain is an insult. If they have surrounded themselves with shallow affirmation and easy comfort, your unwillingness to indulge their fantasies is an attack. They will resist you, not because you are wrong, but because accepting your presence means accepting everything they have tried to avoid. And so they push you back. They distance themselves. They label you as too much because you refuse to pretend. They would rather live in a lie than face the discomfort of growth. But their rejection does not mean you are wrong. It means they are afraid of the mirror you hold up, afraid of the change that truth demands, and afraid that once they see reality for what it is, they will never be able to unsee it. You don't even have to say a word. Your presence alone make people uncomfortable. The way you carry yourself, the way you refuse to conform, the way you don't seek validation from the crowd. The way you don't seek validation from the crowd, it all sends a message, whether you intend to or not. People sense it when you have a standard, when you refuse to compromise on what you believe, when you are not easily swayed by peer pressure or the opinion of the masses. And for those who have built their lives around external validation, that is unsettling, because your existence reminds them of everything they are not. If you are disciplined, those who lack discipline will feel exposed in your presence. If you take responsibility for your life, those who make excuses will feel defensive. If you are driven, those who are stagnant will feel judged without you ever needing to say a single word. They will accuse you of arrogance, of being self righteous, of thinking you are better than them. But in reality, you have simply chosen a path that forces them to question their own choices. And rather than face that discomfort, they choose to resent you. This is why people will sometimes dislike you for no apparent reason. It's not about you, it is not about what you've done. It is about what you represent. You represent effort in a world that rewards complacency. You represent discipline in a culture that celebrates indulgence. You represent truth in a society that thrives on convenient lies. And because of that, you become a target. People will try to cut you down, not because you have wronged them, but because your very existence forces them to look inward and they don't like what they see. But you cannot dim your light just to make others feel comfortable. But what if rejection is not a reflection of your flaws, but a confirmation of your strength? What if people don't distance themselves because you lack something, but because you possess something they are not ready to face? The truth is, when you are real, when you speak honestly, when you don't engage in mind game superficiality, you remove the option for pretense. You strip away the false comfort that people create for themselves. Those who thrive in illusions cannot function in your presence. It is easier for them to label you too intense rather than admit that their ways of living is shallow. It is easier for them to paint you as a problem than to confront their own avoidance of truth. And so they reject you, not because you are wrong, but because you make them question everything they've been avoiding. When you see people drifting away, don't rush to chase them. Don't contort yourself to become more acceptable, more agreeable, more palatable. Every rejection is a filtration process, separating those who are aligned with your truth from those who never were. It is a mistake to believe that blending in will bring happiness. You can sacrifice your authenticity for approval, but at what cost? The moment you start diluting yourself, you have already lost the relationship that truly matter. The ones that bring fulfillment and meaning are built on respect for who you really are, not on your willingness to conform to what others expect. So when rejection comes, recognize it for what it is, not a failure, but a confirmation that you are living in a way that demands truth. And that is something many people simply cannot handle. Most people do not want real connections. They want comfortable ones. They want relationships where they are never challenged, never questioned, never forced to confront anything uncomfortable about themselves. They want affirmation, not truth, validation, not accountability. And when you refuse to play along, when you demand honesty, depth, and integrity, they find you difficult, not because you are unkind, but because you refuse to settle for surface level interaction. This is why, despite being loyal, despite being genuine, despite giving your best, you will still be labeled as too much, because your presence alone requires a different level of engagement. You don't tolerate manipulation, you don't entertain dishonesty, you don't engage in gossip, and that makes you a problem for those who have built their lives around such things. It's not that you are the issue, it's that you make it impossible for them to continue pretending. People will call you difficult when they realize they cannot control you. They will call you intense when they realize they cannot deceive you. They will call you hard to deal with when they realize that their usual tactics, flattery, guilt, passive aggressions have no effect on you. The truth is, they are not used to someone who is firm, who sees through their games, who refuses to lower their standards just to be accepted. And so, instead of adjusting their own behavior, they label you as a problem. But understand this, the right people will never see your standard as a burden, The right people will appreciate your honesty instead of resenting it. They will respect your boundaries instead of testing them. They will see your strength as something to admire, not something to break down. And until you find those people, it is better to be misunderstood for your authenticity than to be accepted for a version of yourself that is not real. If your truth makes some people uncomfortable, so be it. It only means that your presence demands a level of sincerity that not everyone is ready to give. People are often drawn to authenticity in theory, but in practice, it unsettles them. They admire the idea of someone who is real, someone who speaks the truth, someone who stands firm in their values until they realize that that person is standing in front of them refusing to indulge in their illusions. That is when admiration turns to discomfort. Because when you are real, you force people to see themselves clearly, and that is not always a pleasant experience. Many relationships are built on unspoken agreements. I won't challenge your lies if you don't challenge mine. I won't call out your weaknesses if you pretend mine doesn't exist. It's a silence contract of mutual denial where both parties agree to keep things shallow so they can avoid discomfort. This is why, in many cases, people who are real are also the most misunderstood. When you live the life with clarity, when you refuse to play the social game of flattery and false humility, you do not hide your intelligence or soften your word to avoid ruffling feathers, you become a threat. Not because you are cruel, not because you are wrong, but because you expose what is hidden, and people fear exposure more than anything. But here is what matters. You do not need to be understood by everyone. You do not need to be liked by those who would rather live in illusion than in truth. Being labeled as difficult by people who cannot handle reality is not an insult. It's a sign that you are standing firm in who you are. There is no true loss in being left by those who could not handle your authenticity. The real loss would have been losing yourself, trying to keep them, and that is the mistake too many people make. They trade their truth for temporal company, their identity for fleeting approval. What kind of life is built on deluded conversation, on relationship where you have to censor yourself just to be tolerated? That is not connection. That is performance. And if you must perform just to be accepted, then you are not being accepted at all. You are being used. The reality is, not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will value what you bring, but that is not a reason to diminish yourself. It is simply proof that you are meant for something greater. So in the end, the truth is simple. You were never too much. You were never the problem. You were just too real for people who prefer illusions. And that is not a flaw, it is a strength. It also means freedom. It means clarity. It means knowing that whoever stands beside you is there for you, not for what to provide, not for what to pretend to be, but for who you truly are. And that is what, more than any approval, more than any shallow connection, more than any temporal sense of belonging. At this point, I would like to draw the curtain. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do well to do so. Like, share, and leave me a comment. I would like to read your opinion in the comment section. Until I come your way again in my next video, this is Bulurex saying bye bye.